Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn.
And me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 23rd episode of the Stream of Art podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about how to set up your creative environment. But first, we will, of course, do a little check-in. So, Robyn, how did things go for you over the last couple of weeks?
Fine. I'm just kind of in like a pause mode still, but you know, things are fine. No updates or anything. Just yeah. How about you?
I'm really good. I've been really busy working on stuff for my business, my career. I've been working a lot on my album as well. So I'm sort of working in this sort of dual album mode where I'm picking a song and I'm working on improving it. And I do that for about like a month before I go and I share it to get feedback. And at the same time, I'm also just writing a bunch of ideas, not necessarily with the intention of having those ideas actually make it onto the album, but just to try to just keep the songwriting muscle going. Like, I definitely know I want to write more material, and I have a ton of ideas, but I know better than to put that kind of pressure on myself. Like, it seems to only work during RPM. The rest of the time, I can't be like, I'm gonna write a song for my album, because it's not always a guarantee. So I'm just trying to like keep the creative juices flowing. I have a couple of projects I've started. I'm just going to keep doing that and then sort of going through those, seeing if there's anything I can develop. I also have some songs that I started developing that could probably use some attention, just to see if there's something there. Like, I have a couple that sort of put on hold because I just got kind of stuck. I feel like there's potential. There's enough potential there that I haven't forgotten about them, but I just knew I needed some space. So I have a couple of those I have to go over as well. I think for the next while, this is going to be where my focus is. It's going to be on my business and career stuff, and then on my album, and then like some practicing too. So I've definitely toned down the practicing. I came recently to the end of this practice cycle. So I have like a couple of things I'm still working on, but like the practice load has been reduced, so I have more time for creating and more time for all of the career stuff I'm working on as well. So I feel like that's where the inspiration is really hitting me these days. I feel very excited about the direction I'm going in, and I feel like I'm starting to see, like I can see how things might come together, and that's really helping to like pull me forward. So yeah, it's been a good couple of weeks. Yeah,
it's nice when you start to see the picture come together, and it's like it gives you something clearer to work towards, which is very helpful for keeping that motivation going. Awesome.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump in. So I had a couple of thoughts just before we start, just for anybody listening who maybe has never created a creative environment for themselves before. I just wanted to point out like a couple of things to keep in mind as we offer some ideas. The first thing is that it's so important to build an environment that works for you. It's kind of like anything, right? When we talk about like building habits or building routines or building systems, like in the end, it always needs to be something that supports what you want to do. So never feel like there's pressure to create an environment that looks a certain way or feels a certain way. If it helps to support you make art, that's what matters. So just always keep that in mind, and feel free to experiment and, change things, and don't let yourself be limited by your current circumstances. So this is a big one, because generally when you are some kind of a creative person, the ideal creative setting would be like a studio designated for creating. So this is something, I wanted from the time I started doing music. I was just practicing in my bedroom, and I just dreamed about having a studio. I remember going to my guitar teacher's place, and he had his studio set up in his basement, and it was just like that. I'm like, that's the dream, just having like a designated music studio. And then I had one for a while. I had 2 different studios for like 9 years. And right now I don't have that, but that doesn't mean that I don't take into consideration my environment. Like currently I'm set up in the dining room of the apartment that I'm living in, but you know, it can be easy for some people to use not having the ideal space as a reason to not do the work of creating. Yeah. Like, don't let that stop you. Like, this honestly works great for me. Like, as long as I have somewhere where I can connect with music, like I've practiced and written music in some pretty, you know, less than ideal spaces, but you know, that's just what you have to do sometimes. So, you know, do the best you can with where you're at, and just know that you can then take these principles and apply them to an improved space down the line. Like, I'm not going to be here forever. Eventually I will have a studio again. I definitely have like my dream studio in mind that I want to build someday. But right now, you know, I'm not going to let not having that stop me from trying to make my space better.
And ironically, I'm thinking back to when I was in my apartment. It was the 1 bedroom, and I managed to have a little corner that I carved out for myself in there where I did all my art, and it was on like a small little table. And anyways, but it's just funny. I think back to that versus now where I have my own space that it doubles as an office, but it's, you know, studio office. But I did more painting out of that tiny little corner in the apartment than I have done in this studio space, you know?
So interesting.
So it's kind of, I think people think that you need to have a designated space that's separate from everything in order to be productive, but that's not the case. And I actually found it, you know, the way we had it set up in the apartment, like Mike was, you know, doing his stuff over, but we were together still. So I actually felt like it was easier for us to motivate each other.
Oh.
So now I'm like, oh, this actually, I would have thought that this would be more conducive to have my own space. And it's like, actually, that's not really the way it's working out. So just offering a different perspective for anyone who feels like they might be a little bit limited by their lack of space right now. It's not necessarily all it's cracked up to be. It's, you know, it's, yeah.
That's such an interesting point. And you know, that's something I don't think about, because doing music is hard to do with other people around. Like if I'm practicing or I'm playing, that's annoying to people. And if I'm trying to record, having noises is very disruptive and annoying and can stop my ability to record. But yeah, for art, that's so true. Like just having that proximity to somebody else doing their own thing. So yeah, I guess that's something to take into consideration, depending on the kind of art that you engage in. It might be really helpful. Yeah.
And I think for me, I think that the challenge I have in my space right now is it's like, you know, I spend my day working, and then I don't want to just go and like sequester myself in my room all alone to paint. And I think that might be the thing that's kind of like deterring me from like going off and so that it's something to bear in mind. And I think for some artists, I think that's why like the shared studio space is really nice. And there's places, you know, there are places around. I know there's places in Ottawa anyways where you have like multi-unit studios, and there's various artists renting out space and things like that. And that can be really nice because there's that social element and that sense of community and all that. So those are all things to bear in mind. But like I definitely, that sort of like, don't let your present circumstances stop you from creating. And like the other thing too, like I know with painting, you might think, oh, well, I need bigger space because I need to create bigger artworks and stuff like that. True to an extent, but like some of the biggest pieces I've created also were created in that tiny little corner of an apartment. I just had to get a little crafty. So there's ways where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. You totally just blew my mind. I never even thought about that. So the last thing I'd want to add then is that I think art is worth having a space for. So if you are in a setup similar to, you know, the one I'm in now and the one Robyn was in several years ago, you know, don't talk yourself out of giving yourself even just a corner, because you can do amazing things there. And, you know, art and creativity are worth it. They're worth creating space for, even if it's small. Just do the best you can with what you have and where you are now. But there are some things just generally to keep in mind. And again, a lot of this is stuff that I've found helpful. Again, I'm pretty happy to make music in most spaces, but there are some things that just make it easier for me. And for some people, it can be the difference between whether they create something or not. So the first suggestion I would want to offer ties into what we were talking about in the last episode about habits, which is making sure you reduce the friction it takes to get started on creating. So, making sure that in whatever space you have set up, you have your supplies ready to go. Like for me, I always have my guitar plugged in, and so all I have to do is like turn the switch on my amp, and like I'm good to go. So like having just as little friction as possible. And this could also include, actually, something that popped in my head as you were talking about, having, like, not wanting to sequester yourself. If you're somebody who maybe works during the day and you want to be able to play more guitar, keep a guitar by your couch or something. Maybe when the family is sitting around watching a show or watching something, when an ad comes up, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're watching on. Because now, I was going to say, if you do streaming, you don't usually get ads, but now you get ads unless you pay for ad free. So maybe you're going to have ads. So when you have to, deal with an ad, pick up your guitar and just, the idea of like making it be something that is easy for you to do. That's sort of what I was wondering is like, would it benefit you to have like some painting supplies in a common area where you can just like, you have your studio if you need that space, but you also have this other space if you want to just like not be by yourself and you can just create.
Potentially. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's almost like less about building a creative space and more in terms of physical space, but more about building space, like carving time into your schedule.
Yeah.
Because like the space that you create in, it doesn't have to be anything structurally.
Yeah.
And there's lots of people who just do all their painting outside.
Yeah.
It can be playing guitar, like you said, playing guitar on the couch in the living room. Yeah, like broadening your definition of what a creative space even is.
Yeah, it's almost like setting up your whole environment to be something that could allow for creativity. Yeah, so just make it easy to get access to those things. And maybe maybe you could think about it both ways, where it's like, if you have a designated creative space, make sure that it is set up so that you can just get to work as quickly as possible. And then also make it so that it is not the only place you can create, because that also then can create friction. If you're like, well, this is the only place I can create, that's very limiting. If you can be like, well, this is one place I create, and sometimes it works better for certain things, but also I can, go and paint in the living room or out in the backyard or whatever, or I can, I have guitars around. And I think that's one thing I would like to do. Like in my sort of dream home scenario, I would want just like a little house built somewhere with like a good plot of land so I can build my dream studio, but also in my little house have like some guitars and stuff around. So it's like there's opportunity to create there, but then I have my studio for like when I'm doing the heavy duty stuff.
Yeah. You're kind of like embedding those sort of like visual prompts to create. You're kind of embedding them in your whole environment. But then there's like that area where it's like, that's where you go when you really need to dig deep or focus or whatever.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think it encourages the idea that creativity is something that doesn't need to be separate. It doesn't need to be this like separate thing where you have like the serious life stuff and then you have like creativity and it's like off floating somewhere. Like it's a part, it can be a part of your everyday life and everyday experience.
Yeah.
So this is one point I put down, and now I'm starting to rethink it. Reduce distractions and interruptions. Maybe that's beneficial for some people.
Yeah, it's one of those, I don't know. It depends, right? Because I've definitely been like during times where I've been more actively writing, there's definitely been times where it's like I would really benefit from a computer that was incapable of connecting to the internet.
Right.
So in some cases, it can really distract you from doing the work, particularly with work that you're kind of like maybe at that point where you're struggling a bit with it. it, and you don't want to you have to get through that kind of like hump, and you really don't want to.
Yeah.
But then there's other times where like distractions, like there's lots of times when I'm painting and I have a show on, or I'm listening to a podcast, or listening to music, which could be considered a distraction, but it doesn't function that way.
Right.
And interruptions, for me, I've never that's never been something that's been a challenge with my painting. But then I'm very lucky in that, like, I'm not often interrupted, and it's not like, an interruption that might happen. It's not like a kid who's coming in and pulling my attention away for long periods of time. Like I can, it's usually a quick little thing and then I'm back to painting or whatever. So, right. But again, it's like, it's finding what works for you. Because I think there are some people who really like, they're like, when I'm in this space, don't talk to me. And I think that's fair.
Yeah.
If that's what you need. But I don't know. I think like what you were saying at the top, like figuring out what works for you, because don't fool yourself into thinking that is what you need unless it is. Because that can be another limitation. You could be like,
Very
you
true,
could be a parent, and it's like, well, I'm never going to be able to get like that interruption free time. So like, I'm not going to bother because I'm going to need that. Well, you don't necessarily know that yet. So try first and see if you can make it work. And then if you can't, then I don't know. Can you get rid of children?
Can you return them?
Can you return them?
Like,
I don't think so.
No,
How does that work?
I think
parents chime in here.
Is there like an eBay section or something you can just like sell your children? No, I would like to make it clear that
we're not advocating for this.
Stream of Art podcast do not condone selling or giving back your children. No, I think generally what happens is like, well, I guess I have to wait until Billy goes to college.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which I mean, these days it's harder and harder to actually move out. So it's like usually like wait until they're 18. It's like now wait until they're, older than that. So the other thing though, like I've followed artists, and it's such a sweet thing. Like there's one artist who said like what she did was she built a little space within her studio, and so she goes and paints, and she has a little area for her kid to paint alongside her. And I'm like, that is the sweetest, most wholesome thing I've ever thought of. Like, and you can do the same with music. And that would be really annoying, probably. You give your kid the recorder while you're trying to play guitar. Like, I could see how that would be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Hard to listen to? Infuriating.
But like, there's ways.
Obnoxious.
Yeah. There's ways.
And I think about like Bob Reynolds. He's an incredible saxophone player. I've probably talked about him before because his vlog was super influential on me when I was trying to heal my relationship with practicing. And he often will have his kids in his vlogs, and he has like a studio built in his backyard, and like there are a lot of videos where his son will be in the practice room with him, and I think he has like a drum set up, and it's cute because his son has like these little little headphones, but they're like ear protectors so that he doesn't go deaf, and so he's like banging around on the drums while like Bob's doing something like practicing or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, like I think that's the right thing. I feel like we've talked about this before, like having them be a part of it. Like, don't let it be this thing that you feel like you have to hide away. Like, let your kids or let anybody else you live with like be a part of that if they so choose. Like, give them the option to like join in.
That's also a huge gift that you're giving. So like,
absolutely.
My most cherished memories are those of watching my grandpa paint. Like, we would go on camping trips or sailing trips or whatever. And then like he goes, like we're going on a hike somewhere and he goes off and he starts painting. And it's like, we're in the middle of like a family little thing, but he's painting. And that was so cool to see someone do that. And then you could just sit beside him and just watch him do his thing. And it was awesome. I think that's a super enriching experience for the people around you too, or it can be
100%.
Yeah. I think just in essence, like, don't wait for the perfect space, or
do the best you can with where you're at.
Yeah. Because it's very hard to find that, and often what we think is the thing that we need is not actually what we need. So
I think often it's just an excuse to keep from doing the work we know we need to do. It's that resistance, right?
In some cases,
Stephen Pressfield talks about.
I think in some cases we're kind of fed an idea of the things we need. Like for me, right? Like I wasn't I never let the small kind of space in the apartment limit me from doing work. Like I painted quite often and stuff, but I still dreamed of having my own space. And then I got my own space, but it's like, oh, I actually didn't really need this. Although it's nice to have more storage space and wall space and all that stuff. But realizing like I was still doing fine, and I was still doing the work even in a small crammed space. The thing that got me with that was like there was paintings in like our closet and our bedroom and underneath the bed and like in the kitchen, and just like
yeah. Yeah, and painting was fine, but what do you do with all the paintings after?
Yeah, exactly. All the supplies were like crammed in every little corner I could find. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to keep everything in like the same room.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess a lot of that's going to come down to the kind of work you're engaged in. Like you were talking earlier about like writing, versus like painting versus, if I'm doing practicing versus creating. Like I can deal with a lot more distraction if I'm writing a song than if I'm trying to like engage in deliberate practice.
Right.
When it comes to recording, then I need to not have a little meow coming in and giving her opinion. Did I ever share that clip with you of her interrupting my... I'll send it to you after. It's cute.
Oh, I have to show you. There's a video of a greyhound. I can't remember the greyhound's name, but I don't know if it's I think it's a he. I don't know. But so she'll post these videos of her daughter practicing the piano, and the greyhound is just like ruining in the background. And it's so funny. And then she'd stop playing, and the greyhound stops making any noise, and then she'll start playing again, and it just starts singing along, and it's the cutest thing ever. But I'm like, how does this kid stay focused on what she's doing?
I don't know, because I would not be able to focus with that. Like,
no.
All I have to do is see the cat move out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, what are you getting into? Like, I need her to be like perfectly still so I can like focus on the practicing.
Do you ever can you tell when your stress levels are getting high? Like I can tell when I'm getting a little bit stressed, because all of a sudden the sound of Freya like licking drives me absolutely nuts, because she like licks her chomps a lot. Like she like moves, it makes a lot of mouth noises. And yeah, I'm like, oh, I can tell I'm getting stressed, because that is driving me insane right now.
Yeah, your stress bucket is full and you can't handle. I don't get with that with the cat. She's pretty quiet. She's like a pretty quiet paw licker, because she cleans herself constantly and is like silent. But Dresden, my dog, oh man, she would lick her paws. It drove me bonkers.
Yeah.
It's just like, stop licking, stop. She'd always look at me like, what? Like, this is what I do. Like, stop licking
my thing. Anyways, back to the topic at hand.
So yeah, if I'm in, and so I guess I would suggest, being clear about what your goal is. And so if you're really trying to get in deep work, again, a little nod to Cal Newport there. If you're trying to get in deep work, then it is very helpful to have a place where you could have uninterrupted focus time.
Yeah.
And then that's where it is probably a matter of, having a space if you can. And I know I've heard stories of people setting up like a writing space or creating space in their garage or something, and then they get up early and they get in like an hour of time before everybody else wakes up. Like those strategies can also be helpful if you really need that uninterrupted focus. Like I find when I'm writing, I don't want to be interrupted. Like I need to get into a flow with it. So that's also another time. Sometimes the cat has to go away if she's being a pest, because I need to focus.
Yeah.
But yeah, in a lot of cases, I can be working on a song, and if I'm just in that like creative mode, I'd rather not be interrupted. But if she comes and she paws at me because she wants a treat or she wants her food, like it doesn't hurt the creativity to like get up and just get her taken care of and then come back, and then I'm fine to do that. But it's much more disruptive if I'm trying to practice something new and challenging.
Yeah. I also think like have fun with your space too, whatever space you might have, and put things in your environment that you find inspiring.
That was literally my next point, was make it inspiring and comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And every now and then, like, look at the things around you and it's like, do they still kind of give you that spark? Because like there's things that I have, it's like it doesn't really do anything for me anymore, so I switch it out or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that's one of my favorite things about having my own space, is being able to put these little things that like are might just seem kind of random, but for me they spark something. And like being able to choose what those things are without having to worry about what other people think of them is really nice.
Yeah.
You know, like having my own space to decorate as I want to is quite a privilege, and one that I don't take for granted because it's awesome. And also, like, not just things that other people have done that you find inspiring, but things that you've done that you find inspiring.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Like, I have stuff on my walls that I've painted that no longer reflect my style, and I wouldn't go back to painting that way, but for whatever reason, it still like sparks some sort of sense of pride or whatever, and like put that stuff up for sure.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, like things that I have done that I'm proud of, like maybe it's something that I wrote a long time ago that's like actually probably poorly written, but at the time, like, I'm proud that I did it, so I'll put that somewhere. And you know, yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, the idea of being inspired by what you have accomplished. Because, you know, as we've talked about before, creativity can be a challenging thing, and you can hit points where you feel stuck and you feel like you don't know if you're going to be able to create again. Like, I think we all have that point where we feel like, you know, for me, it's like, I don't know if I have any songs left in me. I know I've had those points. I don't get that so much anymore, but there was definitely a point where I'm like, I think that's it. I think I had like a finite number of songs, and I wrote them, and then that's it. But then that's, you know, it was always helpful in those moments to go back and read over lyrics that I had written, or to go listen to songs I'd written, just to remind myself that it was possible that song didn't exist, and then it did. And I'm like, I did that. Yeah. It was definitely helpful to put that kind of thing in your space.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like right now I'm in a creative, not even rut. Like, I'm just not painting, but there's not that anxiety, because it's like I know eventually I'll get back to it, because I have enough evidence around me on the walls to show that, you know, this is not my first rodeo. I've been here before where I've stopped painting, and I do always come back to it. So it can become an environment of almost like there's a sense of security there or something too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can just be a nice space to go to, like, if you are having a period where you aren't creating, because we all need those periods where we can let our creativity like lay fallow, where it's just like give it a chance to regenerate, you know, all the minerals you need to actually create something. Just to be able to have a space you can go to as just that reminder, if you are feeling like, oh, I'm not doing anything. It's like, well, you're doing something, and this is what it supports. Often we'll come out of those periods and have a lot more to say. You need to sort of trust the cycle. And also make your space comfortable too. So it's a good idea if you're somebody who, you know, gets cold really easily, have some blankets around, or, you know, extra sweaters or whatever. Have a spot where you can have coffee or tea or something. Like, you know, make sure you have a place where you can have water. You know, make it a space you enjoy being in, and that you feel like you can be in for extended periods of time if that's what you need.
And for artists, for visual artists, for painters, or for anyone doing messy things, I would suggest, and it's a mistake that I made, but I would suggest using old furniture and like laying down something on the floor, so you're not worried about getting paint on the floor and not worried about getting paint on the walls. Like, so for me, I'm in a space that also doubles as like my work office, so I have like proper desk and like nice floors in here, and I don't want my walls to get messy with paint. So like I am feeling a little bit like restricted a bit in that, like, I'm trying to be clean while I'm painting, which is like, I am generally like a clean painter. Like, I don't get super messy, but there's like this little element of anxiety and stress when I'm creating, because I'm like worried about, you know, I don't want to make a mess around me. And that can be, for me, I'm realizing, oh, that's actually kind of annoying and kind of limiting.
Right. Yeah.
So like, tip for those who are trying to create a space for painting, like, hopefully you'll create something where you're not feeling precious about the space you're in.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I feel like I had another idea. Oh yeah, like candles. I really like candles. Like, something about lighting a scented candle and sitting down and make music is really nice. So little things like that kind of like
ritual
play to your
thing.
senses. Yeah, ritual is that's a huge thing as well. Especially if you do have like a space designated to certain kinds of activities. So like one day I would love to have a space where I have like my computer just for my music making, and then I have a separate one where I do like writing and stuff like that. So then I have different spaces for those different things, because there is like a psychological thing where if you can associate a particular space with a particular kind of work, you tap into that faster. And ritual, like having rituals is part of that. Like having the same, like a same candle that you light or the same drink that you have each time can get you into that headspace a lot faster.
There's ways of doing that within your own, like you can be in the same space but create environments that feel very differently. And I do that with like I have like fairy lights and stuff like that around. So when I'm trying to create, like particularly in the evening, when I'm trying to create like a more inspiring environment, like I turn off the lights and I turn on all the fairy lights, and it creates a different lighting effect. And that can play. So like think about ways you can use lighting to create a different environment for yourself. And I haven't mastered it yet, but like I've tried to kind of create an environment so that like my work environment is different than my painting environment. So like I have a different desk that I work at when I paint versus when I'm actually doing like my day job. And yeah, you can create separations within your space for either by physically laying things out differently, changing the lighting, doing those kind of rituals, whatever. Like putting yourself, it's trying to figure out ways to put yourself in the headspace you need to be in.
Yeah. That the lighting is a really good point, because that's something I'm pretty sensitive to. Like I hate bad lighting, and like the lighting I have in my space right now is actually not the greatest. Because again, I'm in the dining room, I just use the big light. Yeah. And I hate the big light. I like lamps, and I like better. And so that's maybe something. I think that's something I might look into, just getting like a lamp for this space, because I feel like that would actually make a pretty big difference. Yeah, that's a really good point. Another thing to keep in mind is to keep your space tidy, but to not obsess over having like a perfectly clean space, because creativity is messy. And as you were just saying, with like literally messy with painting, but even just, you know, if I'm in the middle of like making an album, I've got like cables, like more cables than usual, like scattered all over, because I'm using microphones, I'm doing a bunch of things, I've got stuff everywhere. That's part of the process. So you want to figure out, or this is what I've done that I found really helpful. I figured out like what my bottom line is for me to feel comfortable. There's a certain degree of like cleanliness I need for my space to feel comfortable. And that's like making sure I vacuum like once a week, just to like the worst of it. I don't, you know, bother like lifting up every cable and lifting up my pedal board and like I'll do like one of those deep vacuums like every once in a while. But for the most part, it's just like I just have a couple of things I have to do to like keep the space feeling good. But I let there be mess. I let there be cables. I let there be the occasional notebook on the ground or whatever, because that is, you know, it is a space you are living in and creating in. So it's find your sweet spot.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because there's a whole, like, for me, I think I am more of a tidy artist than others. And like I have a really low tolerance for clutter and for mess and for chaos. So like I will go through, like, if you're to come into my studio, more times than not, you'd think like, oh, it's really tidy in here. It's really clean. Because it's like I try to keep things. I find it, if I come into a space and there's stuff everywhere, I cut myself off there. If there's stuff everywhere, I'm actually less inclined to want to paint. So I need to have, it's because it causes me anxiety.
Yeah.
So I need to.
So your baseline is higher.
Yeah, I need to have a clean space. And then there's times where like I'll be like stuck in a certain project or a certain series and things get messy, and then I do like that kind of clean afterwards and as a reset, and that's nice too.
Yeah.
But then there's other artists, and like looking at their studios, I'm like, it's so fascinating to me, and I wish I could kind of operate in that space where there's stuff everywhere, like all over the place, but they just know it just works for them. And and some cases it doesn't. In some cases it does. But I think as long as you know where everything is and can find things, it doesn't really matter if your space is complete chaos or not. Like, I think it's just, you need to know there, as long as there's a system to that chaos, because it's once you're in a place where it's like things are all over the place, you can't find anything, that's where there's going to be that resistance, because there's that friction, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
we were talking about before, where we can't find what we need. And
exactly.
But that's always been a really fascinating, and like there is that kind of stereotypical, like artists are like a disaster zone, which I never it never really resonated with me. And in fact, it actually made me feel like less of an artist, because I'm like, I'm actually very tidy. So does that mean I'm not creative because I don't operate in chaos? So like, I don't think so, but
no, not at all. No, because I think for me, I operate better when my space is clean. Again, like to a certain degree. Like I do know after I've done a deep clean, I always do feel better. I can tolerate a lot more clutter than is probably healthy. But I certainly don't think, being a tidy artist makes you less of an artist at all. I guess if the level of messiness is interfering, like you said, with getting it done, with finding things, if it increases the friction, definitely do something about that. But I guess it ultimately comes down to not comparing your space to other people's spaces. Yeah. If somebody's space is messier or cleaner, don't let that make you feel like less of an artist. Like, as long as your space works for you, then that's all that matters.
Yeah. I just think I'm laughing because I'm thinking of like my grandpa's studio, which was meticulous, and he'd be painting and he would have his like, like chino pants and his button-up shirt or something, right? Like just like how clean he was when he created. Yeah. There wasn't any of that messiness. And that's kind of, I think, a little bit how I am, not to the same extent, but I am, I lean towards keeping things clean and tucked away. And I think part of that, though, like circling back, I think part of that is just a result of using a space that is used for other purposes as well. Yeah. And it would be nice. It still would be nice to not have to worry about getting paint on things. Like, because that is one thing you can't really control all the time.
I wonder if they make like painting bubbles. So you can like put yourself in like a hamster ball style thing. You like walk in and then you can paint, and then there's like paint splattered around. But anywhere else. That'd
be so hot in there though.
Yeah, you just install one of those little fans in the corner. Yeah. I mean, there might be something there. It doesn't have to be like a ball. It could be like almost something fashion. It's sort of like, the packages that you get like comforters in. It'd be like that, but like human sized. And then it's like it stands up tall, and then you step into it. Yeah. And you can paint, and then you don't get the paint everywhere. So you can also see your nice space. It's you don't have to see paint going all over it.
They have things like that on a smaller scale for like airbrushing and stuff like that, right? So that you're not so that you're not getting paint all over the place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So just like a larger version for a human to actually fit in there as well. I'm sure there's something like that exists.
If not, that might be our first merch.
Yeah.
Put our logo on it.
Branded, yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably want to test it for safety first. So if a bunch of people are suffocating in there, then that is not going to bode well.
I mean, and breathing in paint fumes and stuff. Yeah, probably not the best thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe we can include some kind of like a mask or something that goes on, like the kind you'd have like in an airplane when it starts going down, where it's like.
I mean, it's starting to sound easier just to like set up the room so I don't have precious furniture in here.
Yeah, but we can't make a bunch of money that way by hawking something people don't need. Right. Come on, man. But yeah, so there is something I think also to the idea of like mise en place, where you're putting things back where they belong. So I think it's ultimately as long as everything is where it needs to be so you can find it again. The number of times I've taken something that usually has a spot and I'm like, I'm going to put it here instead. This feels like a better place. And then I can't remember where I put it and I can't find it. That is very frustrating. So just making sure you put things in a spot where you can remember. Yeah, and making things obvious too. Like for some things, if you kind of forget they exist, like then make it ties in again to habits, like having that cue. Like don't forget this guitar exists. Like put it out on a stand so you don't forget.
Oh, that's a big one. And I get that with like canvases that I buy with the intention of doing something on, and then I tuck them away, and then it's like I'll do like kind of a reclean or a reorganization after a show, and then it's like, oh right, I had all these canvases that I didn't remember that I had. Yeah, and I think that's a good idea too. Like if you're someone who does collect a lot of supplies, and it is worth, and sometimes I do this because it's just sort of like a fun activity. Like when I'm not feeling like painting, but I'm feeling like engaging somehow, I'll just kind of like go through what I have and just take inventory of like my paints and my supplies. And I don't know why, but it's just something that I find enjoyable. It's not a bad idea to do every now and then, because it will remind you of like, oh yeah, I picked up that thing because I wanted to play around with that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, so that's kind of, that can be a fun thing to do every now and then.
Yeah, because tools can really prompt creative expression you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Like sometimes the tool is like the thing, you know, the thing that helps you create something that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So yeah, making sure you are aware of the tools you have can be really helpful, just to give you that constant inspiration.
And it'll prevent you from buying duplicates of things that you don't actually need, because you already have.
That's true too.
Fortunately, that doesn't happen to me a lot, but I can see how it could happen frequently.
Yeah, you're like, do I have that? I don't know. I'm just gonna buy one.
Yeah, particularly if you don't have a really good system of organization. Like for me, everything has its spot, so I know where to check for things, and I know where to look to see if I already have a thing. And I think that can be pretty important.
Yeah, that's something I need to figure out a system for where I am now, because I used to know where everything was. I had like designated spaces, but being in this apartment and having a lot of stuff in storage, I vaguely am aware that I have something, but it could be in a container. It could be in the storage closet. Like I just don't know. So I think I need to, even if I could get just a little like storage shelf or something, so I can put some of my, because I have all these little like cable connectors, and I have, you know, multiple capos, and I have slides, and I have like all this music paraphernalia, and it'd be nice to like have it be all in one spot and just know where everything is. I might look into doing something like that, because I can definitely feel how it stops me from being able to do something. Like I just over the last week or so was trying to track some guitar, and I thought the part would be, I knew the part would sound cleaner if I have this. I did find it. I have this little wrap. It's like a string wrap, fret wrap. It goes around and just helps to dampen like the strings that I'm not using. And I knew I had it. Because it's not something I use regularly, I had to go digging for it. And I remember it being, you know, like so frustrating as I'm trying to look through the shelves and through all these containers and just not being able to find. I did get it, but it slowed me down. I just wanted to get this part recorded. But as I was listening back to the recording, I could hear all this like sympathetic noise. And I'm like, this thing I know I have would fix it. So I definitely could improve that. Again, a lot of that's just a product of my current living situation, but I don't want to use that as like an excuse. I know I can do something to improve it, you know, within whatever means I have now.
Yeah, because you're kind of like, you're almost living out of a suitcase in some ways, right? Like you have
definitely
some stuff that you have easy access to, and then other stuff is tucked away, which is, again, like circumstances are what they are. So sometimes you don't have as much control. But that's a good point too, and I think that's the advantage of having a space, is that you can kind of like an adequate space, is that you can start to kind of, if you have a lot of art supplies or craft supplies or music supplies, you can kind of start to dig those out and keep them in that space so they're accessible, and that opens up opportunities. But again, like sometimes you can't do that. And then it's about getting creative.
Ultimately it doesn't stop me from making music. That's all I wanted. I can still do all the stuff that really matters. And that, I think you have to look for the big wins. Like, yes, often you'll have a situation that makes you realize, yes, it would be better if, you know, X, Y, or Z. But, you know, as long as you can do something, like that really matters. And I think about that a lot relative to something else we talked about in the habits episode, which is creating the best time for you. You know, I talked about how I do my best music work in the first part of the day, because that's when I have the most energy. But for a long time, all I had was the evening, and that's what I worked with. And I'm really glad, because I know people who are the opposite, who they did a lot of like, oh well, once this thing changes, then I'll be able, once I'm in this place, once I'm, it's the arrival fallacy, right? Like once I'm there, then I'll be able to do the thing. But I felt so compelled to do music. I just worked with the time I had, and it's way better where I am now, being able to choose when I work on things. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't spent all those years practicing early in the morning and then in the evening after work or after school. So, it's your time is not wasted if you're doing something now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's it. I like, just don't wait. Like if you have that kind of inkling or desire, like don't wait for the perfect time or the perfect space or the like you don't need to wait. But I think also acknowledging that I think that kind of inclination to kind of, because it is sort of a delay tactic, and I think that kicks in because there's a bit of fear too.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, so like don't beat yourself up if you are that person who's kind of been like, oh yeah, I've been letting those be excuses for me. Like don't beat yourself up about it. Like there's probably a reason why you've let that be an excuse, and it's probably rooted in fear, and that's okay. Just acknowledge that, recognize that, and then you try to figure out a way, okay, like how do I work past this so I can actually show up and do this stuff that I'm really interested in doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it ties into a recurring theme here, which is like you are where you are, and that's completely fine. Like if you don't dwell on how things have been, like you can make a choice now to understand what's getting in your way and to find a way to create anyway.
Yeah.
And I think something important as well to acknowledge is how much of our expectations around what kind of space we should have comes just because we live in a very capitalistic society that wants us to buy lots of things. Like certainly I can't speak for the visual art community, but certainly for the music community, there's a lot of, the sense of, well, I can't really create until I have this particular piece of gear or I have this studio space. Like there's, it's a world of like people sharing their studio spaces and they're like with their fancy monitors and their fancy blah, blah, blah. And it's like all this stuff. And it, and then people feel like, well, I don't have that stuff. And so they feel like they have to spend money they don't have or they don't really need to spend just to create, when it's really like the creating is the thing that matters. It doesn't matter what you're creating on, just like that you're creating is what matters. And yes, I mean, having good equipment makes a big difference, but if you don't have the experience to actually use that equipment to its full potential, you're really wasting a lot of money and wasting a lot of time if you're waiting for a particular piece of gear or a particular space before you're, able to start doing the thing you want to do. So I think that too is like it makes a lot of people very wealthy for you to think you need a bunch of this stuff before you can create that. And this can go down right to plugins. Like, the number of plugins people will try to convince you need, you don't, there's a lot of free stuff you can use that'll get you going. And then you can make an informed choice about what you actually need for what you're doing. Because the only way you're going to define your creative voice is by creating. So
that's because that's not something that is an issue in the painting world so much, because it's like we it's not like a lot of technology is involved in painting. It's like it's canvases, it's sometimes cameras if people are recording their stuff, and it's paint and brushes. And I guess you can get into that stuff like if you're doing sculpture or pottery. I imagine there's like more equipment required for that kind of thing. But I think for me anyways, it was more just that like desperately wanting, because you would like, lots of artists share their studio space, and some of them like they look so inspiring, and like me desperately wanting that inspiring space, thinking that that's the key and that's what will unlock everything. But I quickly realized that's not the case. I don't need that space. That's not the thing that's going to unlock your creativity. It's a nice to have, but it's not a need to have.
Yeah.
So like fortunate in a way in that like I've never felt like there's been anyone trying to like sell me on things, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Because that would be really, it creates these kind of like false limitations if you're feeling like you have to buy all this equipment first.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and there is definitely, like, again, to a degree, there are certain things you need, like, again, depending on the artistic sphere you're in. But
like photographers must come up against this a lot.
I used to work with a photographer, and I think he spent quite a bit on his camera.
Yeah.
And I've known a few other photographers, and it's like the equipment is very expensive. So yeah, certain things there is like a higher barrier to entry in terms of like the equipment you need and the cost up front. But for a lot of what you would want to do, like musically speaking, again, as long as you have a decent enough computer, you can get a free DAW just to get started. You know, you don't have to have Pro Tools. You don't have to have a super duper interface. Like, I started on like one of the cheapest interfaces you could get, and I used that for well over a decade. And it wasn't until later that I upgraded when I could, you know, and there certainly were times, like, I will give myself credit for not letting too much of that be a limitation for me. But there were certainly times when I was younger where I felt like I couldn't really do something because I was missing like a piece of gear that I probably could have found a workaround but it was enough of an issue for me that I did let that hold me back a bit, which is also part of why I feel strongly about it. I'm like, if I had known what I know now, I would have, you know, gotten started on some things earlier.
Yeah.
But, you know, you live and you learn.
Yeah, for sure.
Any final thoughts on environment?
No, I think just work with what you have ultimately, right? And it's okay to want something better.
Of course.
Don't let that stop you from working with what you have in the now as well. And don't let the frustration of how small your space is, or how maybe you don't even have a space and you have to work in the living room. Like, don't let the frustration of that reality stop you from starting or continuing or whatever the case may be. Just, I don't know. That's and it's hard. Like, I know it can be hard, but if the work is important enough to you, like, you deserve to continue doing it regardless of what environment you're in.
Yeah, 100%. I actually did have a final thought I forgot to add, because we talked a little bit about having like a designated space for certain things. I would also add, on the flip side of that, you know, an invitation to try to create in different spaces if you feel like your space is feeling like you're feeling a little bit stagnant. I think like your idea of, you know, just periodically checking in with how your space is set up to rearrange it if it's not inspiring you anymore, I think that could be helpful. But for people who can, again, depending on what kind of art you're engaged in, you know, you might benefit from seeking out some novelty. So if you can go like bring your laptop to the park and like make music, or write, you know, a chapter in your novel, or, you know, bring your paint supplies to a park or whatever, bring a guitar somewhere, like, you know, depending on what you do, not everybody is portable, but if you can, see what happens just going to a different space. That's also, you know, something I used to do even when I did have a studio, is sometimes I would bring my guitar to the living room and sit on the couch and write a song there, just because like the different space put me in a different headspace.
Yeah.
I used to do that in the apartment I lived in a long time ago. You know, I would do a lot of writing in my bedroom, but then I'd also sometimes go to the living room and just like write there. And sometimes that just having a little bit of a change of location was just what I needed to get the thing out of my head.
It also sometimes it can kind of take the pressure off, because it's like when you're trying to do the work in the space where you do the work, there's a little bit more expectation and a bit more pressure there. Whereas when you do it in a space where you don't typically do your work, it might feel more like, oh, this is just a fun activity that I'm doing right now. Like, there's a psychological thing at play there too that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's always an option if you need to change things up. So hopefully you all found that helpful, and maybe you can take away something that you can apply to whatever space you're in now.
Ooh, can we do a thing on Discord where people share photos of the spaces that they work in?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and yeah, so for anybody who hasn't joined our Discord and would be interested, like feel free to join, and we'll actually, I'll set up a channel for like share your creative
spaces.
Space.
Ooh, and
then
ideas.
People can just,
I love that stuff. I love looking at other people's creative spaces and like journals too, like people's like creative, like painting journals. I find that stuff so fascinating.
Yeah, maybe we can do one that's like share your creative space and then share your creative tools.
Yeah.
So if anybody has interesting,
fun as well.
Yeah. So that can be like a journal. It could be painting supplies. It could be gear. It can be, you know, maybe somebody has like a pen they really love to write with or something. Yeah. I'll add that before this episode goes up. I'll have that added. So anybody currently in the Discord can do that. And then anybody new to Discord, feel free to toss in some stuff there. Or also you are welcome to send us an email with a picture. If you don't want to share it with more people, but you want to share it with us, feel free to shoot us an email. I'll give the email and everything at the end. But we'll do our little week ahead goal setting ramp up. I don't know what we call it. So what do you have going on for the next couple of weeks? Just still
nothing.
Still just still in your pause.
Yeah.
Or you're not really a pause, just like a quiet creative period.
Well, not even create. No, it's a nothing. It's a work and then video games after work period still. I
think there's still creativity living in you, even if you're not like actively engaged. I think it's still happening. That's why I meant like it's not a pause. Like nothing stopped inside you.
Oh, I see.
It's not physically happening.
It's starting to bubble up again, but like I'm kind of having to do a bit of a, I don't know. We'll see where things go, but I think I'm kind of feeling like I need to do a bit of a reset.
Mm-hmm.
So future conversations, but for now, just much of the same, which is just rest.
Yeah, I think that's a great goal.
How about you?
More business and career stuff and more album stuff. Hopefully there'll be some content coming from me soon. I have stuff I'm working on. I completed a couple of things this week that now that they're off my plate, I can return my attention to some of the YouTube stuff I've been working on. So that's now going to be like amped up, is like creating content. So YouTube, I have some ideas for stuff for Instagram and more online stuff. So yeah, anybody who's interested in seeing what I do, you are welcome to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, because there is stuff. It's finally happening.
Woohoo!
And if in the coming months stuff still doesn't come out, please feel free to like send me messages being like, you said it was finally
peer
time
pressure?
And it's not happening. Yes, I probably need some accountability, aka peer pressure, to get this stuff done. But no, I feel like it's like things just have kind of come together in the right way. So it's just working on that at this point for me for the next couple of weeks, and I think through the summer that's just gonna be my focus.
Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone for listening. You can send us questions or comments to streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. You can join our Discord. The link is in the show notes. You can follow us on Instagram. Again, links are in the show notes. And I feel like I've left something out. Maybe not.
Go to the show notes.
Yeah, go to if
everything will be there.
It's all there. Yeah, and once again, there are timestamps and stuff there. So if you need to revisit a point, I will have that all timestamped for you for your convenience. And I don't think there are going to be any links to this one, but just in general, I put links to blog posts and to books we talk about and all of that. That all gets linked in the show notes. So feel free to go explore. And until next time, have a great couple weeks. We will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.